Bitchin' Camaro, an early classic from the Dead Milkmen. That song and their popular live performances propelled the group into punk stardom. And with me now is Rodney Anonymous, or Rodney Amadeus Anonymous, or Rodney, what name do you go by now?
Oh, you know what, Rodney Anonymous. I've always gone by Rodney Anonymous. I did stupid things by changing it. No, it's pretty much everybody knows me as Rodney Anonymous. So it's just today's a weird day in Philadelphia because I'm on the front of one of the papers, which is an odd feeling because I came back from work and I had to do all this stuff. And I'm like, this is a very, very strange day. I'm running for mayor against Bill Cosby. You have to live in Philadelphia to understand what's going on here right now.
Rodney Anonymous is with me on Revenge of the 80s
Google Rodney
Radio.
Anonymous, Bill Cosby, and you'll see the local Philadelphia Weekly. It's, we're having another strange week in Philadelphia.
Well, we can have that and Jim Whalewander. How about that?
I haven't heard from him in a long time, but he was a really nice guy. That was, it was interesting for me because I don't know anything about sports. I'm completely sports ignorant. I'm not proud of that. You shouldn't be ignorant of anything, but I don't know. So, everybody, some of the other people in the organization was like, oh, we're in the Detroit Tigers dugout. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. But Jim was a super nice guy. And like most super nice people I know, I have no idea what happened to them. So
he was known for being a big fan of punk music.
Yeah, he was, which is, I guess, was then kind of unusual in the major leagues. I don't know if it's changed since then. I'm sure, punk music became more commercially acceptable as the years went on. But what they called alternative, which I call corporate light, became acceptable.
Rodney Amadeus of the Dead Milkmen with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Let's go back from the beginning. How did the Dead Milkmen start up, and how did you get into the band?
Joe was into writing at a very young age, in his early teens, and which was amazing because where we grew up, nobody knew how to read or write, so he was a standout with that, and he began writing these short stories about this punk band that had started in the 50s, I think, in late 50s. They were sort of like a folk band. I forget what they were called then. I think they were like the Deeks Brothers. And then by the 60s, they had become this psychedelic band called the Sunflower Children of God. And at one point, they had morphed into a pop band called the Milkmen. And then in Joe's story, one of the people died. And so they had to be called the Dead Milkmen. So what he did was he needed to create music to go with the story. Because Joe really liked to flesh everything out back then. He would create board games to go with stories. He was probably the most, and you have to figure, this is like in high school and junior high, so he's the most fascinating person I knew. So I instantly gravitated towards him. And one day he was like, yeah, I've got this sort of story I'm writing, and so we can, and there'll be, we'll make a board game. And his family were like Stephen Hawking's family, and that they would create these elaborate board games, and they would play them for days and days, and it was just so wonderfully weird that the minute I was offered a chance to get involved, I was like, yeah, I raised my hand, I'm in. So that's it was just, again, like a lot of great things at the end, it's a high school joke.
It sounds like it was kind of a fun project, Rodney, but when did you figure out that the Dead Milkmen would take off and become strong in the underground music scene?
I still haven't figured that out. People hated us when we first started, because when we first started, punk was very serious, and people would get up on stage and these songs like, my stepdad, I hate him. And we were like, oh, okay, good. And then we would come up and sing about Charles Nelson Riley, and I remember people like yelling at us, saying like, people are having fun at a punk rock show. They shouldn't be people shouldn't be smiling. So yeah, we've always occupied this unusual outcast niche, and we're pretty happy with that. If people actually really liked us and what we did, we wouldn't know how to handle that.
What's really puzzling out of this whole thing is that people did not like a song about Charles Nelson Riley. I mean, come on.
Well, it wasn't so much the song, it was the effect of the song. Because let's say at that time, there were no, and this is something industrial music went through at one point. And then, like today, you have like Caustic and the Goth Sickles. You have these very funny industrial bands. At one point, industrial was doing the same thing. It was very serious, and you couldn't get up there and make jokes. And that was just the sort of same, wave that punk was going through. So, yeah, people didn't like us for a lot of reasons, I'm sure.
Well, there are those two punk extremes, the ones that take themselves very seriously, and the ones that are kind of like, hey, this is fun. I like to do this.
I could never understand why anybody would want to do something that wasn't fun. I never, to this day, that kind of goes over my head. Even if you look at stuff like, Velvet, I look like they were having fun. I probably didn't know they were having fun, but they were having fun.
A little bit, at least. In your early years, Rodney, you played throughout Philadelphia. So talk about the music scene there in the early to mid-'80s.
It's pretty much as it is now, which is pretty messed up. In the early 80s, you had a couple of clubs, and back then the clubs had acts that were sort of associated with the clubs. So getting to play in the clubs was pretty much impossible. Punk and the whole playing in people's living rooms came out of the fact that we were not allowed to play in clubs. It's the same way now in Philadelphia if you're not a sort of twee, again, what they call alternative act. So if you're not like Best Coast or beach houses, you're not going to get into a club. So if we want to see shows now from interesting bands, we usually have to go to this place up on North 9th Street, and it's a club, but we're not allowed into the nicer places. And it was like that then. It was, extremely like that. And the whole punk aesthetic in this town, which was very accepting and very eclectic and had all sorts of weird bands. And it was great because you would have a punk band on a bill. Nobody could play anywhere if you weren't a pop band. You'd have a punk band on a bill with a rockabilly band, and there'd also be like a poet on the bill. And it was just this really wonderful scene that existed nowhere else. But and it bred lots of great bands. The sad part is that Philly's never really been a music-friendly town, which is why I live here. I couldn't live in somewhere like Austin that's music-friendly, and people, hey, that's a good song you wrote. I would just punch them in the face. I like this town because, no matter how, you can rise really, really high up musically. Not that anybody here ever has since Fabian, but people don't care. And I like a town where people don't care.
Well, you did have the Hooters.
Yeah, we did. And to open that Live Aid causing Bob Geldof to ask who the hell are the Hooters. Now, I shouldn't make fun of them. I understand that they're really nice guys. Like, everybody's met them, says they're super nice guys.
Well, you're not mocking them, Rodney, because that was the line in the Rolling Stone magazine. Bob Geldof actually said that.
Yeah, he actually said, who the hell are the Hooters? And to me, that's, I'd be so proud of that. If Bob Geldof didn't know who your band is, if a rock star doesn't know who you are, that's something to be proud of. If people know who you are, you're getting Grammys and stuff, you're doing something wrong. So we've managed to fly under the radar for so many years. We've had this for like 30 years, and people still don't know who we are, and consider that a mark of success.
Well, not being from New York, Detroit, or L.A., how hard was it to get yourselves noticed outside of Rocky City?
It was impossible. Impossible for a long time. It still is impossible. And there was a film crew in town, and they were making a documentary called Philly's Not Dead. And they asked me a couple questions. And it really is tough for bands from the city. Again, if you're not from New York or LA, or one of the towns that is musically hip, they have these little spontaneous moments, and they're hip for a couple of weeks and they're gone. So like Seattle or Austin or Portland. So if you're not from one of those areas yet, it's darn near impossible to get noticed. So, but again, that's totally fine with me. I prefer bands from like the weird sort of backwaters of America. I think they're much more interesting. And, I don't want to hear a band that made it in a town where it was easy to make it. A lot of very boring bands from towns where it's easy to get noticed. So, yeah, it was, we toured back and forth across the United States and lost a lot of money. And, it is, if you're from Philly, again, it's impossible to get noticed, but is that such a bad thing?
With me is Rodney Anonymous on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Straight ahead, we'll talk more about the history of the Dead Milkmen, and we'll play their latest track. Instant club hit, You'll Dance to Anything. The Dead Milkmen. The group's frontman Rodney Anonymous is with me now on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Rodney, Bitchin' Camaro was your breakthrough hit. We played that to lead off our interview. It featured a very cool improv in the beginning and just some hard, fun stuff at the end. Yeah,
again, we didn't plan it that way. We were in rehearsal one day in our drummer's basement, and, we were just playing that, doing, Dave was just doing that, and I just started speaking over it. And what I'm saying is almost verbatim. I had been in line behind two people at a convenience store, and they had the stuff I'm saying about going to the shore, being 26 and still going to the shore, is pretty much what they said. It was so insane, and it was something that I'd heard so many people say the same sort of thing my whole life. I just thought, I had a bag with me, with a bean and cheese burrito in it, and I thought, take the pen out and write on the bag like what they're saying. And I still do this today. I carry on my smartphone. People see me take it out, and I'll begin to punch in like when I hear people saying odd things. I'm absolutely fascinated. Like most of our songs, just come from crazy things that people have said to me. So I recited back what was on the burrito bag, and the guys played that, and then they had the other song, and they just kind of, the other fast beats, so we melded them together.
Well, college stations continued to play your albums, Rodney, as the Dead Milkmen moved forward. Tracks like Instant Club Hit and The Thing That Only Eats Hippies made you celebrities on the alternative rock and punk circuits. But again, it's like you guys really just didn't take yourselves all that seriously, even though you got more popular.
We shouldn't. And college radio stations shouldn't play us now. We're gone. Go out. I tell college radio stations, go out and play somebody new. And I give them a list. I say, play some Angel Spit. Play some Assemblage 23. I would shake the hell out of these people and go, if you want to play us somewhere in there, that's fine. I do it with my radio show. I play a bunch of new stuff, and I like to throw in, there's a lot of old bands that I like. I'm puzzled by why college radio does a lot of horrible things now. But if anyone's listening from college radio, please stop going to the alternative bin. That music is not alternative, all right? There's nothing alternative about it. So go elsewhere and find stuff.
Well, today's alternative is mainly mainstream alternative. Back in the 80s, it was real alternative. The definition was music that wasn't played on the commercial stations.
That's right. It's odd. People won't believe this when you tell them, but there was a time when the B-52s were considered like a dangerous band. Radio stations considered the B-52s a dangerous punk band. They wouldn't play the Talking Heads. The Ramones, they wouldn't go near the Ramones with a 10-foot stick. It's odd when you turn on TV now and you see those people talking about, and rightfully so, talking about how great the Ramones were, and then they're like, everybody loved them. And I'm thinking, this is such a revisionist history. They would not play them on the radio. In fact, the Ramones wrote songs about not getting played on the radio. I also think it was one of the things the Ramones did right, was not getting played on the radio. It turned out in the long run to, be better for them.
Well, that's true, but that sort of gave them some cred, which is what you guys had and many other of the punk bands, and still some did break in to get radio airplay, maybe had a hit or two, but still kept their punk roots.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think it's a minority. I certainly think we lost all of our cred. We did a lot of stupid things. My problem is I was not good in the past at saying no. So our manager would say, hey, I've got an idea, and I would say no, but not loud enough. So I would, go to things, and there would be, like, I'm still angry about the cowl at the thing. I want to do much more hardcore and angry, I think, than the people around me wanted me to be. I'm lost on my punk cred, but I have some goth industrial cred I can still trade on.
That's a good point. We'll get into that in a few moments, because I was thinking you could get that punk cred back by doing a cover of Dr. Martin's Boots from Radical Posture.
We did that, actually. We played at Dr. Martin's store, basically to get free shoes, and we covered Dr. Martin's Boots. We really did do that. I'm not lying. I know all the words to it, except the price has gone up. So in the original, they're like, these are 20, these retail for, 29, pounds and 24p. And I picked up a pair, and they retail for like about $200. But I will say, I own a pair, and they're the most comfortable shoes in the world. I'm not selling them. I'm just saying that it's in my will that I'm to be cremated in my Doc Martens.
Like you were saying off the air, you do that today, a lot of the kids won't even know what you're doing.
No, they have no idea. I think, again, it's, I try to, I don't want to be like out of touch with like what the current joke is. So I don't want to be like the old guy. I don't get that. So I'm willing to let the young ones go in order to like laugh at something from, to get a joke from. I think it's a great show. That
is a classic. In fact,
it's much funnier than Portlandia.
Yeah, you got that 100% right. Maybe a mix, a little bit of young ones thrown in is always pretty good. After the Dead Milkmen broke up, and this is what you were talking about before, your goth cred, you worked with another band, Burn Witch Burned, with your wife Vienna.
Yeah, that was an idea I had. I don't understand why this wasn't a big money maker. And I think we stumbled upon steampunk before anybody else really knew what it was called, So I was in a sort of proto-steampunk band, and I really enjoyed that. And at that time, there were bands like Rasputina or the Dresden Dolls who were doing very different stuff with very different instruments, and that's where we tried to go with that. And I don't know if it would have gone on. My wife she sings beautifully and plays violin, but she never told me until we had the band for a while that she suffers from stage fright, and so she couldn't actually go forward with the band. So I was like, oh, well, I could remarry or I could just end the band. So I decided to end that band.
You could always just stay in studio like XTC.
Well, this was, again, my mouth is full of stuff here. This was before the sort of cheap home studios. Like now, the studio I have in my home would have cost millions of dollars to build in the 80s or 90s. And, I just, this is, cost me a couple grand, max. Oh, I said it's just cheaper. A lot of stuff I own is stolen. I am a terrible kleptomaniac. This is true. I will steal anything that isn't nailed down. So, yeah, it is cheaper for a band in town to have a Kickstarter thing going so they can get a touring van. They're called My Parasites. And I saw a police van sitting unattended. I thought that would be the best gift for them if I could just steal a police van. So, yeah, my wife has to watch out for me. I will anything that isn't nailed down, I will take.
So let's get this straight, Rodney. You would steal anything, and your blog is called Rodney Anonymous Tells Us How to Live.
It's Rodney Anonymous Tells You How to Live. I think I'm more qualified than most people to tell people how to live. In fact, that's what every blog is. Every blog is somebody telling you how to live. If you turn on any talk show like Oprah, it's Oprah telling you how to live. I just don't beat around in the bush. I say this is how to live. I should write like a manual for life and say, chapter 1, this is what to believe. Chapter 2, this is how to act. I think that would probably be very helpful. I should get around to that one day.
You also have a radio show that goes along with that.
Yeah, the radio show is sort of the thing right now. I do a lot of odd things. I do a lot of writing and have the band, and I should work a regular job. But the radio show, you do a radio show, you know what I'm talking about. It's the thing I really kind of enjoy doing, probably the most. They gave me free reign to play whatever I want. So once a month for 2 hours, I just go on and play whatever the hell I want, and it's completely different from the station's regular music that they play, and they're really cool about it and really support it. They said, well, what kind of songs? I'm like, well, how about like Fosgore's 20 Ways to Kill Someone? And they thought I was making that song up. I'm like, no, it's a real song. It's really good. So, yeah, the first show, I think, scared the hell out of them, but they were nice enough to stay on board. I think I have a listener. I think there is one person that totally listens to that show. After that, and if that person gets sick or decides they can't listen that week, I'm in deep trouble.
We'll make it 3 or 4 after this show. How about that?
There might be 3 or 4, yeah.
There we go.
All of Philadelphia is constructed around the idea you shouldn't be able to hear the music I'm playing on the air. That is totally how it works here. It's a very strange, as you pointed out before, it's a very strange city.
Rodney, I want to talk about the band's new music, but let's take it back a little while, because after your band broke up, went your separate ways, did some very interesting projects. One of your guys, your bandmate David Schultes, became very active in rebuilding Serbia.
Yeah, he rebuilt most of it himself, yeah.
Well, he did try to help out, definitely. And
yeah, no, he did. I'm not being a wise ass for the first time ever. No, he was again a very fascinating person. A degree in economics, Eastern European economics. We went over to what was Yugoslavia. It was then falling apart and becoming in different countries. I hated it there. And he actually looked around and went, yeah, this place has opportunity. Yeah, he was over there at one point when the UN had dropped bombs on a bomb shelter he was in at one point, the UN forces. So, yeah, he got bombed in Serbia.
That's true, and it was an incredibly noble life's mission.
It doesn't seem weird if you knew him. Like, if anybody else, they go, where is he? You go, oh, he's over in Serbia right now, and they go, that's kind of odd. Not with Dave. That's sort of where you expected him to be.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he committed suicide back in 2004. That must have been pretty rough news for you guys.
It was rough news, but we tell people now he faked his death and he lives in Serbia. That's really what we go, because when you really, it's almost, some people think I'm absolutely a horrible person for saying this sort of stuff, but if you didn't know him, there's no way that you can be sad when people talk about him. If you knew him, you couldn't be sad. So because he was just so funny and everything, he was just so hilarious and just a funny person that when we had his funeral, people were just cracking up about the stuff he used to do. So we decided that he lives in Serbia now. He's got like 2 wives and a bunch of kids, and that's pretty much what we tell people. And we get the best looks ever, and it would totally serve him. He'd be totally happy because all he did all day long was just play pranks on people and mess with them. And he was a great person for that. His whole life had been this fight against boredom. And, the worst thing could happen is he would get bored, but then he would do things like set trash cans on fire, or you couldn't have him near a telephone on tour because he would instantly begin crank calling people out of the phone book. And, it was a lot of fun. So people were always expect me to be sad when I talk about him. And all I could think, I really wish the guy hadn't faked his own death and moved to Serbia, because I'd love to have him around now, because I probably only got, about 10% of how brilliant he was when I knew him. And as the years have gone by, I'm like, man, that guy was really had his act together. He was, I feel sorry for a lot of stuff I did to him. Like one time, the cops came to my hotel room, and David just woke it up and wandered down there. So I pointed him out as the troublemaker. Yeah, I'm like, it was him. I'm really afraid of that guy. If we just get him out of there. So that was a good night. That was poor Dave. Dave put up with a lot. Yeah. He was okay with it. He was really bizarre. He had like a sleep apnea problem. So what program is it? So what happened was he would wake up hours after he got out of bed. In other words, he wouldn't quite be awake. So if you woke him up around 8, until about 10:30, 11 o'clock, you could have great fun with the guy. He was kind of out of it. It was almost like a zombie. So you sort of walk him around and go, "Hey, Dave, go do this," and he would. Or if somebody had shown up at the house because they were mad at us for making noise or for altering something, then we would just say, "Oh, this is the guy you want to talk to," and he was barely awake. He was a lot of fun.
Rodney Anonymous is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Straight ahead, we're going to talk about the new music. The Dead Milkmen, the thing that only eats hippies on Revenge of the 80s Radio. With me is Rodney Anonymous. Rodney, the Dead Milkmen are back together now, and you released a new album last year, and you're putting out some new singles.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, I'm like the most anti-vinyl person in the world. So the fact that I was willing to do singles just shows like how much I get along with the rest of the band. But they can go, "Oh, please." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Generally, I'm really anti-vinyl. If I go over to somebody's house and I have it, I break it.
Well, maybe you just didn't say no loud enough again.
Yeah, I did. It's not saying no loud. Although it's worked out. I like the singles. I have them. They're super cool. My wife gets the one with Ronald Reagan Killed the Black Dahlia will make my wife laugh at like 100 yards. So, and also, I've worked with some other people's singles. So I'm not so much anti-single anymore. And they come with little download cards and everything, so you can get the digital version. I get a whole bunch of them right here I'm looking at right now, as a matter of fact.
Well, I like showing vinyl to the kids when they come in and do radio station tours. They look at me like I have two heads. Although one smart alecky tiger cub once said that's one of the things they used to use in the olden days.
It's weird because a lot of young people are really into vinyl now. It's like that's all they have. There's a hipster store in town, record store. It's a really good record store I go to called Digital Ferret. It's a great record store. But there's a horrible hipster record store I won't say the name of. And I went there, and the guy before me had asked for some record, and the woman goes to get the vinyl, and he's like, "No, it's a CD. It's just most of our customers prefer vinyl." I'm like, oh, lady, you're going to pay when I get up there. So, so I gave her a real hard time for being a hipster.
Rodney, your new single is The Great Boston Molasses Flood.
There was a big molasses flood in Boston, which people don't believe, but really happened. In 1919, they used to use molasses for a whole lot of sweetening things, and actually it's surprising it happened as late as it did. And they held in these huge tanks in Boston, and then one day one of the tanks ruptured, dumping, I believe, about 250 million gallons of unprocessed molasses into the street, and a tidal wave. So it's a tidal wave about 30 feet high of molasses. I'm just surprised that nobody's written a song about that, because when you hear it, it just sticks in your head. And I really like Boston. Boston's a city that I started spending a lot of time in when I was young, so I've always been kind of fascinated by it and wanted to write something about it. And I've always had this, there was a magazine, a fanzine, back, talk about something young people don't know about fanzines, called Murder Can Be Fun. And Murder Can Be Fun had an entire I Love Disasters issue, and the guy he loved disasters, and that was one of the things they mentioned in it was the Great Boston Molasses Flood. So for, I'd say, about 25 years, I've wanted to write a song about that.
I wonder how many people got stuck in that thing.
I believe it killed at least 50, but for the longest time afterwards, Boston was all covered in this sticky goo, and for years in that neighborhood, I'm talking, this happened in 1919 and well into the late 1940s, when it would get hot out, you could smell the molasses because it seeped into the cracks in the sidewalk, down into the streets, and it would just ooze molasses for years. Again, this is fascinating stuff. I was just saying, if I have my choice of ways to die, I think molasses flood is a pretty good one. That's something memorable. And people at your funeral will be trying not to laugh. They'll be molasses flood. So, yeah, I think as far as ways to go, I'd rather, die that way than have like a piano fall out the window on me.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And at the funeral, you'll smell pretty good, too.
Yeah, that's true. They don't even need to really bury you. They just smear you on some toast or something.
Yeah, I could see during one of those molasses floods, people coming out of their apartments with a big jar and a ladle.
Yeah, that's the thing that they never talk about, because molasses back then, everybody used it for everything. It was the all-purpose sweetener. They would refine it to get like this, industrial alcohol. So it was like money pouring into the street. So I'm pretty sure that for the longest time after that, when you bought molasses, you probably had to pick, bits of gravel and stuff out of it. Yeah, I feel bad for the horses that were killed in the Great War. I don't care about the people, but I've always felt bad for the horses that were killed in the Great Boston Molasses Flood.
That's because they have no idea what's coming. They don't understand the concept of molasses.
That's a horse's worst nightmare. You know what I mean? Because you got the blinders on, you're pulling around a trolley, and then you don't even hear it coming. All you know is that you are suddenly covered in this goo, and your horse life is over.
And you can't even find those salt licks around anywhere.
No.
Rodney, the Great Boston Molasses Flood is your latest single. Anything else the Dead Milkmen has coming down the pike?
Yeah, we got a song called Welcome to Undertown. I'm only mentioning it. I never mention what we're doing. I wind up talking more about other people's bands and what they're doing. They usually fascinate me a lot more. But this is, and you know how like people go, it's like African Child in the movie, Get Him to the Greek, where the guy just wants to talk about his new song. They want to hear African Child. I would not be mentioning this song, but Joe wrote it. It's like my favorite Dead Milkmen song. So in a couple months when Welcome to Undertown comes out, you go, oh, he was right. That is a really good song. So yeah, and then that's beside it with the song While I Was Walking to Work, which Dan Drew, our bass player, wrote the music for. And then we also have another one, because we do 3-sided records, and the third side is called The Sun Turns Our Patio into a Lifeless Hell.
The sun can do that, huh?
Yeah, well, no, I was up one night and I couldn't sleep, and I saw this ad for this awning. And I don't know if you've seen this or not. It's a I think it's called the Sundowner awning. It is the most tragic thing on TV. It's this entire family becomes social outcasts because they can't use their patio. It needs to be seen. It is high drama. It is like a Harold Pinter play, and it's that good.
You have some live shows coming up, too, including one in New York.
Yes, I believe so. No, I can't tell you where in New York. Everybody else knows. I'd have to go to the Milkmen page, and I'm terrible about them. I never know. I know we're playing. Oh, we're playing the Bowery Ballroom. See, thank God for thank Charles Nelson Riley for the Milkmen page, because I would be completely lost without it. And yes, it says here the Bowery Ballroom in New York City. See, to me, that's weird, because I think of the Bowery, I think, back to the 70s, when the Bowery was a much different place than it is now. Yeah. Do you miss old New York? I miss old New York from like the New York when you watch Midnight Cowboy, and it's that scary, dangerous New York. They need to bring that back. I don't need a New York with the Lion King in Times Square. Right? I need the old porno-ish Times Square that you were afraid to sit down there. The Times Square from my youth needs to be brought back.
Right now in New York, the mayor wants you to not have large sodas, smoke too much, or, well, basically do things he doesn't like.
I'm totally with that. I'm totally with that. There's nothing more obnoxious than being in the 7-Eleven behind a kid with a big gulp. Smoking. I know that there's really a lot of people will beat this. There's no health effect from secondhand smoke, but smoking has lost all of its cool. It used to be when you saw like Nick and Nora, like the Thin Man, like everybody was sophisticated smoking. My wife just quit smoking a while ago, basically because smoking became the province of redneck. It's not fun anymore. The people on Honey Boo Boo smoke. And if you can deny anybody a thrill, I say if you deny the people on Boo Boo their large sodas and their smokes, they might go out and read something.
Maybe it's time to switch to the chawing tobacco.
Chawing, yeah. There was a big protest here in Philadelphia. It was an anti-healthcare thing. But there's a woman carrying a sign that said, get rid of them czars. And czars had a hammer and sickle spelling the C and forming the C. And I explained to her, I said, well, you do know that the czar, the communists got rid of the czar. And I explained to her, basically 300 years of Russian history. And she's like, oh, that is fascinating. I goes, well, I'm still here because these new rules won't let my son, I wish he could be here, but he's in school. He chaws. And I hadn't heard what chawing was. But, her son was 12 years old and chewed tobacco. What a charming individual. They busted her in from outside the city. I should point that out, too. Dick Armey's organization paid to bust this woman into my city to hold up a historically incorrect sign and talk about her 12-year-old son who chaws.
That's some scary
stuff. Why isn't that a song? I should turn that into a song. Damn it.
Now, that's a cunning plan.
Yeah.
Rodney Anonymous, thank you for coming on Revenge of the 80s Radio with us.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much.
We'd love to hear from more of your cunning plans and great music. You can find out what the Dead Milkmen have been up to on their website, www.deadmilkmen.com. Let's play your newest single, Rodney, The Great Boston Molasses Flood, from the Dead Milkmen on Revenge of the 80s Radio.